In this video, I'll be showing you how to review performance of your Google Ads account over an extended period of time to find issues with the performance and correspond those issues to changes in your change history tab inside Google Ads. We're going to be doing this every 2 weeks, and we're going to be doing this by campaign, and the date range we're going to use is approximately 16 weeks. So first, we're going to go to Google Ads. Then we are going to select our date range, which is 3 to 4 months. In this example, we're going to use about 3.5 months. Click apply, and then we're going to look at the cost per conversion and conversions. So what we can see here is a clear peak in terms of conversions and a clear minimum in terms of cost per conversion. We can see a clear drop off and wild increase in cost per conversion, and then we can see a corresponding increase in conversions and decrease in cost per conversion. So in this case, we have found that the problem has actually been fixed. So there is no issue with this Google Ads account, so we can move on to the next one. If there was no increase and it flatlined like this, we would say, okay, we clearly know how well we can do, and we're not doing as well as we should be doing. And so we would want to go back to change history. And so first we'd want to find the date. So that was the week of April 29th is when we had that peak. We would then want to filter for the April 29th. So 28th to the 4th. Or 28th to the 5th, click apply. And we're going to select a campaign. And we can see where the increase was. So there was clearly a change here, and then clicks dropped off and conversions dropped off as well. So if, for example, if we go back, and we go back to our wide timeline, if our performance had not recovered like it did in the past couple days, we would note that as an issue. Come here to change history. We're going to go back to that week that we were just looking at. Click apply. So you can see this triangles note that there were changes made, and we can note that very clearly there was a change made and then performance drops. So we would want to go and look at all the changes that happened on May 1st. So we're going to just go to May 1st. We just want to look at May 1st. So click apply. And we can see all of the adjustments that were made that could have caused an issue. So more than likely, it's not all of these that caused an issue. It's just one of them that caused the problem. But that is very hard to figure out. So what we typically do is we undo all of these changes from that given date. This is why we like to make changes in slow increments, because if you make a bunch of big changes all at once, it's hard to tell what caused the problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to undo all of these changes, and then over the course of the next few weeks, we will be watching to see how the campaign performs. If the campaign starts jumping back up, then we'll know, okay, perfect, we've found an issue with one of the changes we've made, and we'll need to go in and slowly but surely make these changes again, because some of these changes were good. So if we go back in and we look at broad match keywords that were paused, some of these broad match keywords were probably causing us to get clicked on by people who weren't actually interested in our service. But it could have had a negative impact in terms of like our ad quality score or Google's algorithm. It could have messed up a wide variety of things. So we will track all of the changes that we've undone right here. That way, over the course of the next few weeks, after we let it get back to its normal performance, we will then come in and make a few of these changes every week. So that way, if we say we change back all these broad match keywords back to phrase match, and then the performance drops, we're like, okay, that was clearly the issue when we did all this. And so we can undo that, and then we can try to implement the other changes and see how the performance increases or decreases based on those changes. Obviously, it says changes can't be undone. That basically means you can't just click the undo button. You need to actually go back into the campaign, and it shows the campaign where the issue was, and it shows if it's an issue by ad group. It can show what ad group the issue was in, or what ad group the change was in, and then you can go back in and manually make all these changes. But that's why we only want to look at one date, because we want to find the specific time when our performance actually dropped off significantly. So that's how we would go into the change history and find issues and fix them. I'll be showing you the data from a couple other accounts, so that way you can get an idea of what is a data point that's worth investigating and what is more of just a general trend that needs to be fixed with other management techniques. Here's another account that we work on. For example, right here, do you see how it drops from 2 conversions to 0 conversions? Typically, yes, this would be an issue, but this is not a sustained decrease. This is only over the course. Each one of these data points right here is representing a week. And as you can see right here, this is just June 17th. This doesn't actually represent, so if we go back and look at this calendar, it's just the data from June 17th. All these other data points are data points from an entire week. And additionally, this is not a sustained decrease. So like right here, see how it drops and goes back up? This is not a sustained decrease. This is not worth investigating, because it went back up to the average. It all averages out over time. So it jumping up and down is not necessarily a problem as long as the average trend line is good. So as you can see here, if you just kind of drew a line between all the data points, the average is kind of staying steady. It's not dropping at any point. So there's nothing to investigate in terms of change history that would need to get fixed. This right here is another example of a decrease that is sustained barely for about 2 weeks and then gets back up to its average. This is why we do this every 2 weeks, is because you want to give it enough time for the peaks and the valleys to kind of average out. This is another one where it's like, this is a good peak, but we don't necessarily want to take anything away from this. That doesn't necessarily mean that we made a change that's just that fantastic, because you can see it drops back down. And over time, it averages out. Same thing if you just look at cost per conversion. Cost per conversion spikes up and stays up just a tad. But as you can see, it comes back down and averages out. So as long as it's coming back down to the average after these peaks, you're okay. There's not much to worry about. If you are concerned about these peaks, you can go back and look at the change history to see if there were any changes that were made the week of May the 13th, to see if possibly there was a change that caused this spike, but that was mitigated by other changes you made over the course of these 3 weeks. So this is something that could be looked into, but since the campaign has actually dropped back down to the average, we're okay. It's definitely something you can look into if you're looking to make improvements on your account, but it's possible that it's a waste of time because your account is already back to performing normally. However, if you see it spiking up often, like as you can see here, there's a couple different spikes. You can always check in to see if there's possible changes that you've consistently made that cause these spikes that you then cancel out later on. It's always worth just investigating just to get some more information, but there are other changes that are more important to worry about. So what we've been looking at is just the total account for a lot of these businesses, but what we're going to do for this one is actually look at by campaign. So if you have more than one campaign, this is how you want to do it. You don't want to look at it by the entire account because different campaigns are going to have different performance drops and issues. So what we can see here is that our average, at least for conversions, is kind of sitting right around here. So we had a really high right here and a low right here when the campaign completely stopped for a week because there were budget issues. But as you can see, the average is sitting around this, right below this 40 mark. But where we can see right here is the past 3 going into 4 weeks, the conversions have dropped off a little. And then we're going to look at the cost per conversion to see if there's an issue there. And as you can see here, there was low cost per conversion right here, and the average has kind of spiked up and stayed relatively high. So this is definitely something worth looking into. In this case, we know that it was a budget issue because if you can look here, they both go to 0, and that means the ads weren't even running. So we know that that was the issue, but for other accounts, there may be a different problem. So what we're going to go here is clearly the focal point is the week of May the 6th. So we're going to go to change history. We're going to go to May 6th, go back a day, and then 5th through the 12th, click apply. And we can see here that there were a bunch of changes made on May the 5th that would have led into the week of May the 6th that could have caused those issues. One thing to keep in mind, our campaign was completely stopped because they maxed out their credit card, and that's not going to show in the change history. So that is partially part of the problem. But let's say your campaign was still running. Let's pretend like this campaign was still running. These would be the causes of the problem. So clearly there's a spike after these changes, so we would want to go in and undo all of these changes. And then slowly but surely pause these keywords again as more data comes in. Because we paused a big grouping of them, so that could have thrown Google's algorithm out of whack. That's why we always make our changes relatively slowly. We don't want to do big grouping changes unless absolutely necessary. You want to change a couple things at a time. That way, when you go back in and you see any issues, because obviously management is never perfect, there's going to be changes that just don't mesh well with Google's algorithm, and you need to go back in and adjust them. Google just doesn't handle big adjustments all at once very well. This isn't necessarily a massive adjustment, but it is something that we're going to undo, and then watch the performance over the course of the next 2 to 4 weeks to see how the campaign reacts to us undoing this. And then if the campaign performance jumps up and we see that maybe some of these keywords aren't working very well, we can go in and pause specific keywords out of these groups. And we're obviously going to want to track those keywords that we paused, or maybe just track the day of the changes that you undid. That way you can go back and look at it instead of having to write out all of that. So we'd go in, make those changes, and make a note to review this in 2 weeks just to see how the performance of the campaign does. And so that's why we check by campaign. We don't just check by the entire account. So we're going to go back up to the overview. Go back to our 16-ish week time range, and we're going to look at the other campaign. And as you can see here, this campaign actually hasn't had an issue, and you can see that it dropped off because of what we mentioned earlier. This is just talking about the data from the 17th. Not the entire week of the 17th. So we're actually just going to go back to the 15th, so that way we don't have that drop off in our data. But as you can see here, our cost per conversion is clearly our conversions are clearly on an upward trend. Our cost per conversion is clearly on a downward trend. So this is good. That means there are no issues that really need to get fixed. Everything has been done appropriately, and that's why we look at it by campaign, because if you look at it by account, if my computer will work, as you can see here, this is why we do it by campaign, because if you look at the overall account, the cost per conversion has actually gone down and stayed down. and the conversions have actually been on an upward trend as well. But when we just previously looked at each campaign, you could see that one campaign's performance was clearly doing a lot better than the others, and we have changes that can clearly be made to one campaign based on the change history, while the other campaign doesn't have any changes that need to be made based on the change history. So always make sure you're doing it by campaign in order to get the most precise results and make the best adjustments possible for your account. Thanks for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.